Welcome. We sift through documents, interviews, all sorts of sources trying to get to the heart of complex stories. And today, especially for our true crime listeners, we have a real head scratcher, a case that just keeps twisting.
We really do. We're calling it the Papini paradox. You probably remember the headlines nearly a decade back. California mom vanishes while jogging.
Oh, yeah, huge searches, national attention. Then she reappears, seemingly brutalized, looked like a miracle, a survival story.
Exactly. The perfect victim narrative, you could say. But then, years down the line, boom, the feds prove it was a hoax.
A massive hoax, a conviction for fraud, for lying to the FBI. You'd think, okay, that's the end of the story, case closed.
Not even remotely, because now, after serving her time, Sherri Papini is back in the public eye. New interviews, a docuseries.
And she's saying what?
She's saying the abduction wasn't a hoax. She's doubling down, claiming she was a victim of non-consensual torture, and she's naming her ex-boyfriend, James Reyes, as the actual abductor.
Wow, okay. So that's the mission today. We've got the solid federal case DNA, phone records, the conviction right up against this very persistent, very detailed new victim testimony.
Right. We need to unpack what the official record actually says, how they prove the hoax, and then try to understand why this story just won't settle. Why is it still so unstable?
Let's get into it. Okay, let's rewind. November 2nd, 2016, Shasta County, California. Sherri Papini disappears while out for a run.
And it wasn't just a local story. It blew up nationally. Massive searches, FBI involved, rewards offered. It was everywhere.
Then, 22 days later, Thanksgiving morning, she's found alongside Interstate 5. Battered, chained, hair chopped off, and this bizarre brand on her shoulder.
A really disturbing image. And her initial story, the one she stuck to for years, was very specific.
2 Hispanic women, right?
Right.
Armed, abducted her at gunpoint.
Exactly. That specific detail, 2 Hispanic women, became the absolute focus for law enforcement for more than 4 years.
Think about that. 4 years of police work, resources, investigative hours, all chasing a phantom lead based on her account.
It's actually quite staggering the amount of resources poured into finding those 2 women. Yeah. But eventually, the whole narrative just crumbled.
When was this? Around 2020.
Yeah, 2020. And the key, unsurprisingly, was forensic science.
The DNA. That's always the game changer, isn't it?
Almost always.
Yeah.
They found male DNA on her clothing when she was recovered, on her underwear, her sweatpants. Critically, it didn't match her husband, Keith.
Okay, so unidentified male DNA, but how did they connect it?
Well, that DNA profile went into CODIS, the national database. No hits for years. But then, in 2020, investigators got authorization for a familial DNA search.
Ah, so looking for relatives in the database.
Precisely. And that search pinged a relative of her ex-boyfriend, James Reyes. That was the breakthrough.
Okay, so Reyes is on their radar. What happens next? Does the rest fall into place quickly?
Pretty much, yeah. Once they had Reyes' name, they started digging into phone records, car rentals, that kind of thing. And they found a digital trove.
Burner phones.
Yep. Prepaid phones. Papini and Reyes had been communicating secretly using these burner phones since at least December 2015, so this wasn't just a random encounter.
An ongoing connection.
Yeah.
And the phones proved Reyes was involved in the disappearance itself.
Absolutely. This is where cell site data becomes crucial. Tracking which towers the phones connect to.
Right, it gives you a geographical path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They tracked Reyes' burner phone traveling north from Southern California up towards Redding, where Papini lived, on November 1st, 2016.
The day before she vanished.
Correct. Then, on November 2nd, the day she disappeared, both burner phones, his and hers, connected to the cell tower nearest to where her phone and earbuds were found.
So they were together right there.
Right there. And immediately after that, both phones started pinging towers heading south, down I-5 towards Southern California where Reyes lived.
That's pretty definitive. It completely contradicts the abduction by strangers story. What did Reyes say when they confronted him with this?
He folded. He admitted he helped her run away. His initial explanation, or rather, her initial explanation to him, was that she needed to escape her husband, Keith.
She claimed Keith was abusive.
Yes, Reyes told investigators Papini claimed Keith was beating her, even raping her, and she desperately needed out. But crucially, Reyes insisted Papini had something planned up. He said she planned everything.
So he saw himself as helping her escape, maybe, but she was the one driving the plan.
That's what he maintained. He was the facilitator for her escape plan, which then morphed into this elaborate hoax.
Which brings us to the really weird stuff. What happened during those 3 weeks she was supposedly captive at his place?
Well, according to Reyes, it was all part of the staging. She asked him to board up the windows of his spare room in his Orange County apartment.
Board up the windows. Why?
To make it dark, he said, so no one could see in. He used particle board. She wanted to create the appearance of confinement, but he insisted she was never actually tied up or locked in, not until maybe right at the very end when they staged the release.
And did anyone else see her there?
Yes, that's another key point. Race's cousin visited the apartment twice during that time and saw Papini.
And what did the cousin say?
He said she seemed fine, unrestrained, not acting traumatized or like a captive at all, just there.
Okay, so not exactly a terrified hostage situation. What about her physical condition? She lost a lot of weight.
Reyes addressed that too. He said she was deliberately eating very little. He specifically recalled her eating like half a banana at a time. She was intentionally trying to lose weight to fit the victim profile.
And the hair. She had long blonde hair and it was chopped off.
Reyes said she cut her own hair shortly after arriving at his place. Another detail seemingly designed to mimic an abduction scenario.
This is just bizarre. I know, the injuries, the bruises, the marks, the brand, that seemed so real, so violent. How did Reyes explain that?
According to his testimony to the FBI, most of it was self-inflicted or done with her consent as part of the plan. He said she hit herself to create bruises, burned herself on her arms.
She burned herself.
That's what he claimed. He admitted helping with some things, but insisted it was always at her direction. Like the bruise on her leg, he said she asked him to shoot a hockey puck off her leg.
Shoot a hockey puck?
Yeah, but lightly, he stressed. Just enough to make a mark. It sounds less like torture and more like, I don't know, DIY movie effects.
It's deeply disturbing either way. And the brand. That symbol burned onto her shoulder. That felt like the most shocking detail.
Reyes claimed that was her idea too, 100%.
She asked to be branded.
According to him, yes. He told the FBI she instructed him to go to a Hobby Lobby in Huntington Beach, buy a specific wood-burning tool with cash, and then brand her right shoulder.
He admitted doing it.
He did. He said it was difficult, he was nervous, the tool was hot, but she insisted. She apparently told him the phrase or symbol had some personal meaning to her. This wasn't something done to her unexpectedly. It was, according to Reyes, a planned event early in her stay.
The level of planning, if Reyes is telling the truth, asking someone to brand you, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Yeah.
It highlights the alleged calculation involved in crafting this narrative of victimhood. It's a profound betrayal, if true.
Okay, so fast forward to August 2020. The FBI and Shasta County Sheriff's detectives have the DNA, the phone records linking her to Reyes, and Reyes' detailed confession about the hoax. They sit down with Sherri Papini.
Right. And this is where it shifts from just unraveling a story to potential federal charges. They lay out the evidence, the DNA match, the phone pings showing she traveled south with Reyes.
And what's her reaction?
Complete denial. Even staring at the proof, she digs in. The FBI agent specifically warns her multiple times, look, lying to federal agents is a crime, a felony.
And she still denied it?
Vehemently. According to the documents, she said things like, no, there is no way it's Reyes. There's no way. Because he loves me, there's no way. She just wouldn't budge.
That level of denial in the face of such direct evidence is pretty remarkable. She kept that up for a while, didn't she?
She did, for nearly 2 more years. It wasn't until April 2022 that she finally agreed to plead guilty.
What were the specific charges in the plea deal?
1 count of mail fraud and 1 count of making false statements to federal law enforcement. Essentially, admitting she lied and admitting she defrauded victim assistance program.
And the sentence. Prosecutors recommended something fairly light, considering.
Yeah, the prosecution recommended 8 months, citing her eventual cooperation with the plea deal.
But the judge wasn't having it.
Not at all. U.S. District Judge William Shub rejected that recommendation. He felt it wasn't nearly enough, given the scale of the deception and the harm caused.
What did he sentence her to?
18 months in prison, more than double what was asked for. Judge Shub made it clear he wanted the sentence to serve as a deterrent. He talked about the need to send a message about the seriousness of these kinds of elaborate hoaxes that waste resources and manipulate public sympathy.
Let's dig into the fraud part, because that's key to the federal charges. She lied to get money, right?
Yes, specifically from the California Victim Compensation Board, CalVCB, and also the Social Security Administration.
The CalVCB fraud seems particularly bad, given that money is supposed to help actual crime victims.
It's incredibly cynical. Her application to CalVCB, signed under penalty of perjury, repeated the entire fabricated story. Kidnapped at gunpoint, held captive, tortured, trying to escape. All lies designed purely to get access to those funds.
Did she involve her therapist in this?
Unwittingly, yes. Her therapist, believing the story, submitted treatment plans to CalVCB, detailing the trauma from the kidnapping, the torture, the branding, the drugging.
So the therapist's reports backed up her fraudulent claim?
Exactly. And based on those false claims, CalVCB mailed out about 35 separate payments between 2017 and 2021.
How much money are we talking about?
Over $30,000 just from CalVCB. That covered things like her trauma counseling, ambulance services when she was found, all stemming from the hoax. She basically turned her fake victimhood into a revenue stream.
Just astonishing. And the final restitution order was much higher than that 30 grand, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, much higher. The total restitution ordered was $309,902.
Wow, where did that larger number come from?
Well, it included the $30,000 plus fraudulently obtained from CalVCB and Social Security. But the bulk of it, the rest, was to repay the investigative costs incurred by the Shasta County Sheriff's Office and the FBI over those 4 years they spent chasing her fake story.
So she literally had to pay back the cost of the investigation her lies triggered.
That's right. It represents the concrete financial burden her hoax placed on law enforcement.
And then there was the GoFundMe campaign, too. People donated money to help find her.
Yep, a campaign called Bring Sherri Home Safe. It raised nearly $50,000, about $49,070.
What happened to that money?
The plea agreement details confirmed that money was withdrawn and put directly into personal bank accounts belonging to her and her husband, Keith.
So it wasn't used for search efforts or anything?
No, it was used to pay off personal debts. Specifically, the agreement mentions using GoFundMe money to pay off their credit cards, including over $3,000 directly onto Sherri's personal card just weeks after she reappeared in December 2016.
So multiple layers of financial deception. Victim funds, taxpayer money via law enforcement costs, and public donations.
It paints a comprehensive picture of fraud built entirely on the foundation of the kidnapping lie.
Okay, so she serves her time, 18 months minus good behavior credits, I assume. And now she's out, and suddenly the story changes. Again.
Dramatically. She's done a docuseries, other interviews, and her core message now is the abduction was not a hoax. James Reyes wasn't helping her run away. He was her abductor and torturer.
Wait, so she's completely contradicting the basis of her own guilty plea?
Essentially, yes. She's trying to reframe it. She now claims Reyes became abusive when she tried to end their emotional affair. She insists all the horrific things, the branding, the beatings, the chaining, the drugging, were real and inflicted by him against her will.
But she pleaded guilty to making false statements. She lied for years about the Hispanic women. How does she explain that part?
Her explanation now centers on fear. She claims she had to lie about who did it, inventing the Hispanic women, primarily to protect herself and her family.
Fear of who? Reyes.
Fear of Reyes, yes. She says he threatened her, warned her he'd be watching the news, made sure she wouldn't name him. But she also claims she was terrified of her husband, Keith.
Afraid of Keith finding out about the affair.
More than just the affair. She alleges Keith had made violent threats against her in the past, mentioning something about chopping me up into little pieces. She says her biggest fear was losing her children if Keith discovered everything.
So the lie about the abductors becomes an act of desperate self-preservation in her new narrative, driven by fear of both Reyes and her husband.
That's the argument she's making. She's trying to separate the lie about who did it from the event, the alleged abuse. She's basically saying, okay, I lied about the who to survive and protect my kids, but the torture was absolutely real and non-consensual.
Which is the polar opposite of Reyes' account, where she directed the injuries as part of the staging.
Exactly. It puts their accounts in direct, irreconcilable conflict.
What specific details of abuse is she emphasizing now as non-consensual?
She talks about the branding again, the bites on her thigh, a footprint allegedly left on her back, being chained to a pole or wall. She refutes the self-infliction idea by saying things like, how could I brand my own back? How could I bite my own inner thigh?
And the memory issues. She initially seemed to have gaps.
She attributes those gaps to being drugged. She claims she doesn't remember getting in the car with Reyes, that she woke up intermittently in the back seat feeling very high. Drugging would explain memory loss and lack of resistance, potentially.
Okay, but the FBI case seemed solid, built on Reyes' confession and the physical evidence matching his story of staging. How does she counter that?
Her camp now alleges the FBI investigation itself was flawed. They're essentially saying the FBI didn't probe Reyes hard enough.
How so? What's the specific allegation against the FBI?
They claim the FBI basically led Reyes, suggesting to him that if Papini wanted to be part of this, if she consented to the kidnapping or the injuries, then maybe what he did wasn't technically a crime, or at least not as serious.
So, suggesting the FBI gave him an out to secure his testimony against Papini.
That's the implication, that they minimized his culpability to make a cleaner case against her as the mastermind.
That's a pretty serious claim against the investigators.
It is. And they add a psychological layer, arguing Reyes passed a polygraph because he's supposedly a sociopath who can lie without remorse, making the test meaningless in this case.
And what about the evidence found at Reyes' place? The pole, the boarded-up window evidence.
See, that's fascinating. When Reyes confessed, he told the FBI about those things, the pole in the closet, the nail holes from the boards. The FBI saw this as proof he was telling the truth about the staging.
Right, corroboration of the hoax setup.
But Papini's side now points to that exact same evidence, the pole, the holes, as proof of real non-consensual captivity, proof that she was chained up, that the room was darkened against her will.
So the same physical evidence is being used to support two completely opposite narratives.
Precisely. It shows how context and narrative framing can completely alter the interpretation of facts.
And finally, she's trying to redefine her guilty plea.
Yeah, she's claiming the language in the plea agreement, the part admitting the hoax kidnapping, was constructed by the government, not her own words describing what happened. She admits lying about who did it, but denies the underlying premise that the whole 3 weeks were consensual.
It's a very fine line she's trying to walk legally and publicly, accept the conviction for lying, but reject the core reason why the government said she lied.
It's clearly a strategy aimed at rehabilitating her image, perhaps for the ongoing custody battle.
So Papini is out there now publicly accusing James Reyes of being this dangerous sociopathic abuser, pointing to the evidence in his house. But legally, what's happening with Reyes?
Nothing, officially. Despite her new, very public claims, the government's stance hasn't changed. The assistant U.S. attorney involved in her case explicitly stated they are not looking to charge anyone else in this case.
So the feds are sticking with their original conclusion, that Reyes was a co-conspirator in her hoax, not an independent kidnapper.
That seems to be the position. His cooperation, his testimony that fit the physical evidence of staging, likely secured him from further prosecution related to the kidnapping itself, even if his actions aided her fraud.
Which must be incredibly frustrating for Papini if she now genuinely believes he abused her. What are her options regarding Reyes?
Legally, not many on the criminal side, it seems. Her team has mentioned they're considering a civil lawsuit against Reyes.
Suing him for damages based on her new claims?
Presumably, yes. Using her public testimony, maybe details from this book she's apparently writing. But her credibility is obviously a massive hurdle after the federal conviction for lying.
Okay, beyond Reyes, the personal fallout sounds immense. The marriage ended.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Keith Papini filed for divorce very shortly after she took the plea deal. And now the focus is squarely on a really bitter custody fight over their 2 kids.
How old are the children now?
Around 9 and 11, based on the timeline.
What's the current custody situation?
While she was in prison, Keith was granted full custody, which Papini actually concedes was appropriate then. But now she's out, she only gets supervised visits once a month.
Once a month? Supervised? That sounds very limited.
Extremely limited. And she argues it's completely unnecessary now. She sees it as punitive and harmful to the children. This is where the parental alienation claims come in.
Right, she's accusing Keith of turning the kids against her.
Yes. Parental alienation is basically when one parent systematically manipulates the children to reject the other parent. Papini claims Keith is doing exactly that.
What specifically does she accuse him of?
Refusing to participate in reunification therapy, which is often standard in these situations. And she claims he made several false allegations against her to Child Protective Services.
False allegations like what?
Things like Munchausen by proxy, suggesting she faked illnesses in the children, and claims about alcohol misuse involving them.
Were those investigated?
According to Papini's side, yes, and they were found to be unsubstantiated. She uses this to argue Keith is deliberately trying to poison the well, using tactics common in, as she puts it, toxic divorces.
She also mentioned something about her son using specific language.
Yeah, she claims her 9-year-old son used grown-up words like manipulative to describe her, which she believes is clear evidence he's being coached by Keith.
So her whole strategy now seems to be painting herself as the stable parent who did her time and Keith as the one actively damaging the children's relationship with her.
That's definitely the narrative she's pushing, trying to leverage her past claims of fearing Keith to explain the original lie, while simultaneously using his alleged current actions to fight for more access to the kids.
And this family conflict even involves her own sister.
Apparently so. She's publicly accused her sister, Sheila Coaster, of forming a highly inappropriate relationship with Keith, starting back when Sherri was missing.
Inappropriate how?
Papini describes her sister as having always been incredibly jealous and claims Sheila became overly close, almost clingy, with Keith during the disappearance. She even mentioned them joking about Sheila being Keith's second wife.
Wow. That's complicated.
Papini sees it as her sister siding with Keith and participating in what she calls a toxic family system designed to isolate her further.
So her view is she got convicted for lying, but Keith unfairly got everything, and now the real victims are the kids caught in the middle.
That's the essence of her current public appeal. She's fighting hard, emphasizing that even the judge in her criminal case said they don't take children away just for lying. She wants to regain custody and believes Keith is unfairly using her conviction against her.
You know, for anyone who follows true crime, the Papini case really hits on some recurring and frankly uncomfortable themes. The initial media frenzy is a prime example.
Absolutely. It perfectly illustrates what's often called missing white woman syndrome. The sheer volume of coverage she received was wildly disproportionate compared to cases involving missing women of color. Experts widely agree on that bias.
And beyond just the media attention, the investigative resources dedicated to her initial story
Were enormous. 4 years chasing those fictional Hispanic women. That's taxpayer money, investigator time, lab resources, all diverted away from potentially real unsolved cases because her narrative was so sensational and, well, fit a certain demographic profile.
The judge considered that misuse of resources in the sentencing, didn't he?
She did. It was a major factor in the 18-month sentence. But there's a really important flip side to this that needs stressing.
Which is?
That Papini's hoax, as damaging as it was, should not deter actual victims from coming forward. The prosecutor in her case made that point very clearly.
Right, because false accusations are actually very rare.
Statistically, incredibly rare, especially for violent crimes like kidnapping and assault. The danger is that high-profile hoaxes like this create skepticism. But the overwhelming majority of people reporting harm are telling the truth. The message has to remain. Believe victims, support victims. Papini exploited that fundamental trust.
Now, looking at her current narrative, the post-sentence story, how is she trying to establish authenticity this time? It seems very centered on psychology.
It is. She talks a lot about her vulnerability, her diagnosis of self-defeating personality disorder, her people-pleasing tendencies rooted in childhood trauma. She uses this psychological framework to explain why she lied initially, the fear of disappointing people, losing her family.
So the psychology explains the lie, but she maintains the abuse narrative as the current truth.
Exactly. She's suggesting that her willingness to be open about her flaws now, combined with the evidence she claims is in her upcoming book, should somehow validate this new version of events where Reyes was the torturer.
But the timing is convenient, isn't it?
That's the core of the public skepticism, I think. This intense media campaign, the book launch, the detailed sharing of trauma, it's all happening precisely while she's fighting for custody and facing massive restitution payments.
It makes it really hard to separate potentially genuine recovery and trauma processing from a calculated performance aimed at swaying public opinion and maybe the family court.
It's incredibly difficult. Is it genuine vulnerability or is it strategic manipulation? Or maybe some complex mix of both? She's essentially swapped one elaborate story for another, equally elaborate story that directly contradicts the first. And both versions require you to accept parts of her testimony while dismissing others.
It really underscores how messy truth can get when trauma, potential personality disorders, lies, and high-stakes legal battles all get tangled together.
Definitely. It's a case study in narrative warfare and how hard it is for anyone, investigators, judges, the public, to definitively establish objective truth when the storyteller themselves keeps changing the story. Hashtag tag outro.
So wrapping this up, the Papini paradox leaves us in a really uncomfortable place. We have two starkly opposing realities.
On one hand, the official federal case. Solid forensics DNA, phone data, Reyes' detailed confession about helping her stage a runaway, all leading to her conviction for fraud and lying. That record feels pretty concrete.
But then you have her current persistent narrative. A detailed, emotionally raw account of non-consensual torture, drugging, branding, captivity, pinning everything on Reyes as the sole abuser. She admits the initial lie about who, but insists the what was real.
It completely destabilizes any sense of a clean resolution. It forces us to grapple with the possibility that someone could be both a convicted liar and fraudster and potentially a victim of some form of abuse within that same event. or that the second story is just another more complex manipulation.
It really highlights how difficult it is for the justice system and for us as observers when narratives are actively constructed and then reconstructed, maybe influenced by trauma, maybe by calculation, maybe both.
And that leads us to a final, unsettling thought to leave you with. Think about all the resources poured into this case based on her first lie about the two Hispanic women. Now, the official investigation concluded Reyes was just a helper in her hoax. But Papini is now vehemently claiming he was the abuser, the torturer.
Right.
So given that Reyes himself led the FBI to evidence in his home, the board marks evidence that could be interpreted as tools of captivity.
Mm.
What responsibility, if any, does law enforcement have to re-examine Reyes's role, especially when they explicitly say they're not looking to charge anyone else?
Mm.
If her news story holds even a kernel of truth about non-consensual acts happening during those 3 weeks, what does it mean for justice if the person who admittedly facilitated key parts of it, like the branding, faces no further scrutiny based on the original hoax conclusion? It leaves this really troubling question about accountability hanging in the air. Who is ultimately responsible for what when the narratives are this tangled?